Welcome to Game Day Travelcast with Dave, Caleb, and Chris. This man coordinates Division II umpires nationally, preaches transparency, and sees the system from the outside in. Tonight, John Brower joins us to talk philosophy, accountability, and the hard truths about the state of Division II umpiring. Welcome, John Brower, to Game Day Travelcast.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here.
John, we hung out a little bit a couple weeks ago. You were doing a East Coast trip, look at some umpires, evaluate some umpires, and what amazed me was the level of transparency that you showed in looking at the guys that we have in the regional pool. Talk to us a little bit about why that's important and what are your philosophies when you approach these evaluations for national consideration.
Well, I appreciate the question. I think it's really important for me to be out there to show the umpires that I'm just an old umpire that got a few breaks. I like to humanize myself to the group, and I make it very well known that I'm giving them observations. I don't want to transform them or carbon copy them. I just want to give them some observations on how they can improve. I've got no other agenda other than to make Division II baseball as good as I possibly can.
So one thing that I want you I want to highlight, you and I sit and talk. Now I'm a conference umpire supervisor. So there are things that I take into consideration when I choose umpires. You're a national coordinator. You're looking for the best of the best to go to carry and work a World Series. Sometimes what we're looking for in umpires, it differs sometimes. So talk to us about the technical side of what you're looking for. That I think umpires at any level, or officials at any sport, because this is a travel cast for all officials, that they need to understand what they're being evaluated for and how they're being evaluated.
Okay, the first thing, I'm a judger. I'm many times, if I don't go in the clubhouse before the game, I'm judging you, the umpire or the crew, when they're walking on the field, maybe from their walking from the clubhouse to the field. I think it's very, very important for the individual not only to be a good umpire, but a good person. And I'm really hardcore that. I've talked about that for years and years when I was a conference coordinator. It's easier to be a good person than a good umpire. Being a good person is a choice. Being a good umpire takes an awful lot of hard work and dedication to the craft. So I'm looking for that individual that's both. It's like I told you when we were together in North Carolina or South Carolina, Dave. I also look, do I want to spend 10 days with this person? And that, while that might sound selfish, but I'm really looking for continuity in the clubhouse. My clubhouses, we have a lot of fun. We just enjoy each other. When we walk out the door of the field, it's business. But I want continuity. I want people that can cohabitate with 7 or 8 other people. That's very, very important to me.
John, I think I remember reading that for the first time for Omaha, TrackMan scores are going to be a part of that selection process. Can you talk about, like, as you travel around the nation, is that something that it's a part of your evaluation, or are you mostly looking at the things you've talked about off the field just now, and then also the mechanics that you observe?
Well, I think Division I is making somewhat of a small error. They're going to base a lot of their decision making on the analytics. When I have it available to me, I do take advantage of it. But here's the thing: when I get a list from, let's say, Dave Brown, I'm getting what's supposed to be his top 8 or 10 or 15 umpires. Okay, I'm really not going to watch them call balls and strikes. Okay, if it's something that's egregious, well, then Dave sent me to the wrong people. But I'm going to see all the ancillary things, the rotations, the mechanics, the athleticism. You know, like I said, if I'm going there to watch, the strike zone, then I've probably got the wrong guy. By the time they get to me, they ought to have a pretty good idea, or I shouldn't say guy, person. By the time they get to me, they should have a pretty good knowledge of the strike zone. I don't want anybody going out and shooting 100%. Okay, we are not, even at the national championship, we're not calling enough strikes. 93 to 95 is optimum. Most of our scores last year, and we did have TrackMan on every game last year at the national championship, were between 92 and 95. I think a high was 97 and a low was 88. And believe it or not, even the 88 score didn't hear a word out of the dugouts, because he was consistent from start to finish, and the teams just made an adjustment. I don't want it that low, but in the same respect, we had no issues. So that says a lot right there.
One of the biggest things we focus on is developing officials we call professional development. So it's totally different than umpire training with balls, eyes, strikes. It's professional development.
Yes.
And can you give me a story, the feel-good story where an official that maybe you evaluated, you gave him some input, maybe thought it was kind of harsh or kind of went down, but then came back and is absolutely a success story?
Oh, Chris, that's a very common story because when if I have the opportunity to post game an umpire or a crew, I tell them my observations 100%. I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm not the guy that's going to go out and tell somebody how they're doing everything so great. Okay. My job is to make them better. And if I'm not talking about something, you're probably doing it pretty well. If if I am talking about something, I would like to see you make an adjustment. I have had several people, even this year, they weren't very happy with me when we left the clubhouse. But after trying what I suggested, they called me up and said, "Oh my gosh, a fellow that I watched 2 weeks ago. This fellow's 6'4", and when he was behind the plate, he could have been a little person. I mean, he was literally 4 feet tall, and I, I I said that's a shame. I would have died to have that kind of size when I was umpiring. Um, he made an adjustment. I watched him on TV on a replay of a game from last Sunday, and oh my goodness, it's a different person. And he called me up and he said, "John, I don't know why I ever got away from this, but I feel great. I'm seeing everything, and I really appreciate that." So, that a little bit of validation for me, but I know in my heart, I'm doing this in my heart to make Division II baseball better, to make the umpires better, regardless of what level. And I always talk about people cap out. Whatever division or level you cap out at, be the best person at that level you can possibly be. So, or best umpire, best official that you can possibly be.
So John, from your chair where you sit, what myths do umpires believe about how true advancement really works? What are you seeing?
Well, in the past, I'm going to preface this by saying the former coordinator and I are best friends. Okay. We do things very, very differently. We talk 2-3 times a week sometimes, but we do things differently. He is a man of his word. And I like to think I'm a man of my word too, but I don't make promises. Okay. This person made promises, and to his credit, kept every single one of them, every single one of them. And I admire that. but I'm always afraid that I can't keep a promise. Therefore, I don't make any. Okay. I can't, time served to me doesn't mean anything. Next in line doesn't mean anything. My job performance is evaluated by the product I put on the field. Okay. That's pretty much the only way it's evaluated. And I kind of like my job, so I don't want to get bad evaluations, just like an umpire doesn't want to get bad evaluations. So if, it's just like the fellow in Florida that I saw out of nowhere that 2 years later, he's probably going to go to the national championship. Well, he leapfrogged 5 or 6 guys in that region. Well, what that did was that sent a signal, he's not the only person that's leapfrogged, but it sent out a signal to everyone else in the country that, oh my gosh, this guy's creating a competitive atmosphere. And I better keep working hard because nothing's guaranteed. And that's just it. Nothing's guaranteed. After every year, the last 2 years, I put out an email to every single one of our postseason umpires. And it's, close to 100. And the very last, it's just thank you. I appreciate your dedication to Division II baseball and yada, yada. At the very bottom, I said, do not rest on what you achieved this year because nothing is guaranteed going forward. And I think people believe me now. And that helps me create a competitive atmosphere. And it gives people an incentive to get better.
And John, in the postseason, how are you picking crew chiefs for each one of these levels?
Well, that I do use experience. Okay. Not only current Division I or Division II experience, pardon me, but past experience. Normally what I've decided to do after when I was hired, I said, I need to bring one person back for the national championship every year. That person will know how the lay of the land, what I expect, what's expected of each umpire. And if something goes south on the field, they can take care of it. If something goes south in the clubhouse, they can take care of it. So my first year, I brought back a fellow that used to work for me in one of my conferences. So he was a crew chief. Last year, I brought back a fella from Florida. He was a crew chief. This year, I'm not going to divulge who I'm bringing back, but he will be a crew chief. And then I kind of try to fast forward to the next year. And some of our regions have more depth than others. And this particular person is coming from a region that's not very deep at all. So chances are he will be my returner. And he will be a crew chief as well. And the crew chief, everything from our clubhouse guy, how we take care of that person, what we do after the games in the evening, stuff like that. And I try to include sometimes we have families there. The families are always included in anything we do off the field because it's an experience for everybody.
Hey, John, if you had an opportunity to have every assigner, coordinator in a closed door session with all the things we have, replay, officials, signing games, like you said, travel, rain delays, policies, rule changes. What is the one thing you would say to them to get everybody on one court on number one issue you would bring up?
Chris, that's a great question, and I've thought about that a lot over my time. I wish more coordinators would know their staffs. I know that Dave Brown knows his staffs. I know that. But I've got 17 coordinators in 22 Division II leagues, conferences. And I know a lot of them don't know their staffs. And the days of putting what I call names to games are over. The competition, the level of play has increased so much, and the compensation at the Division II level is increasing and continuing to increase. Names to games is no longer acceptable. Unfortunately, some coordinators don't take that approach. But I'm pretty hardcore about that. Now, that being said, there are a couple conferences in the country where it's slim. The number of officials is not as great as, let's say, in North and South Carolina or Georgia. You get up into the Northeast, and those guys are officiating hockey. Those people are officiating hockey, not baseball. Well into March and April probably. But that would be the biggest thing. Get to know your staff. When I was a conference coordinator, I tried to achieve where I had 3 crew chief level umpires on every crew. And by the time I gave my conferences up to become the national coordinator, I was there. And it confused the coaches sometimes because Joe Blow would be crew chief this weekend. Well, 3 weekends down the road where he sees the one of the coaches again, he's not the crew chief. So it kind of confused them a little bit, but they quickly understood that, my gosh, we've got 3 really quality people here.
John, first I'd like to say, man, Game Day Travel Care, if this conversation is making your drive to the park a little bit better, hit follow us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, because this is great conversation. But John, I want to take this moment to highlight something you said about transparency. I know that you and I sit and talk about officials, umpires, and I give you a list. And I really want the transparency to be as clear as a bell. Once you're on my platform, I rate you, I give John a list, and then you're in John's arena and he comes and does his work. I could be in love with the guy, and in your arena, you're like, Dave, there's things I don't like about his game. Now, let me be clear. I have 20 more studs in the stable. And I want my umpires to understand it's not just being one of my top guys, it's being one of our top guys. You have to meet the metrics set by the national coordinator just as much as you have to meet the metrics set by me. Now, if you're in that pool and at the end of the day, John says, hey, he's tapped out, hey, I have the next horse in the stable ready to go. So there's a thing called fighting for a guy, fighting for your staff. I'm going to fight for my guys, but I'm not going to do it to the detriment of everybody else that's fighting. So, John, when you give feedback, it's important. So let's talk about the honesty between us and the honesty between coordinators and national coordinators so that guys know exactly what the score is as they're progressing to postseason.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little background on that before I answer that exactly.
It's a deep question.
When I first got the job, not more than 3 or 4 days after, now I had a relationship with, I don't know, probably 12 out of 17 coordinators, and I called everybody to introduce myself and all that stuff. But I had 3 coordinators call me, and they would say, this guy, he can do this and he can do that, and he's great at this, he's great at that. And I'd let the coordinator go through the whole thing, and I had one question when he was done. Is he the best umpire on your staff? All 3 times the coordinator said, well, no. I said, well, why are we having this conversation? I said, it's my responsibility, whether it's regional, super regional, or national championship, to put the best available umpires in that region, which is a whole nother topic, on the ball field. If I'm not doing that, if I'm the next in line or time served, I'm not doing my job. So that happened 3 times. And at that point, that's where I figured out I've got to create some turmoil or a competitive atmosphere, which I alluded to earlier. And I got some very good advice from George Strocius, the past Division I coordinator, and I think I got us all on a pretty good path. When I go out and evaluate somebody, like I said earlier, there's some things that I might say that that particular official doesn't like. Um, but I don't say anything out of malice. I have no reason to. Um, when I give somebody my observations and my evaluations, I want them to be better. I want them to prove to me I've got to use them in postseason. Now, some people are able to make adjustments and some people aren't, but that's entirely up to the individual. But, I always tell people, control what you can control. We've all heard that before. Don't worry about the guy next to you. I also tell a short story about when I was evaluated for the Big 12. I knew I could work with those guys at that level, but the guy that was doing the evaluating didn't like me. He didn't like me as an umpire. He didn't like me personally. He's 88 years old. He still doesn't like me. That's his problem. But
John,
I
chances
was
are you're gonna
upset.
die. You're gonna die, and he's not gonna like you still. So that's
Yeah, and you know what? I feel bad for him, but he's really not on my Christmas card list either.
yeah.
So, um, but it didn't define me as an umpire. It didn't define me as a person, and obviously things worked out pretty well. But that's where I decided I'm just going to be the best. JUCO is very strong in the Midwest. Best JUCO and best Division II umpire I can possibly be. And like I said, it seems like it worked out pretty well. So everybody's got their own opinion of their ability. That's where I come in. Sometimes I agree. Unfortunately, many times I don't. But that's not saying that a person can't get to that, and I admire a person that works and works and works, and I might see him this year, and I might not see him for a year and a half. And I go, oh my God. There's a guy that I watched and I was really proud of him because he's worked hard. And I've seen him at some camps over the years, but from the very first time I saw this gentleman work, he's tenfold better. And I was really proud and happy about that.
So John, how long does that process take? Or actually, a better question would be, how long is the process of someone being evaluated? So if you're given a name of someone and you say no, is it a no this year, or is it I'm going to be looking at this person for the next several years to see if I have an eventual yes?
Well,
What's the timeline
I
look
do
like
have
for
a
you?
rating system. I have my own rating system, and I keep all my notes from year to year, and I'll refer back to my notes. The only time I ever close the book on somebody is if they just don't have it, if they're just not qualified, and there's no, in my opinion, no way they can get to that point. Maybe they would be an outstanding high school umpire, travel ball umpire, or whatnot, but not everybody can umpire at the Division III, Division II, Division I levels. And we talked earlier. I think Dave brought up about people's attitudes, but young people today have more of a immediate gratification, self gratification. They're not very patient, and this is a process. It's probably 2 or 3 regionals minimum, 2 or 3 super regionals minimum, and then you've really got to be an exceptional umpire that I'm in fear of losing. And what I mean by in fear of losing, to Division I. Okay, so I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose a quality person for my national championship because he had to wait in line. There we go back to that next in line type thing, which I'm totally against. So it's hard for some people to understand because people are, jumping over him, leapfrogging and whatnot. But, when I was all my friends jumped over me and went on to Big 12, Missouri Valley, Big 10, Summit. I was the first person to call him and congratulate him. And
Yeah.
that's the way I would hope most people are, because I have no control over Caleb, how you perform on the field. But I can be happy for you if you advance. Or I can aggravate my own self and not be happy for you. But what good is that?
So, Chris, you got a follow up?
Yeah, when he was talking about the evaluations, I know a lot of I've heard a lot of officials complain about a subjective based evaluation versus a fact based evaluation. When it comes to subjective base, I can't never meet that because it's an opinion in their mind versus fact based. What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, it is, but it's my opinion. And right now, I'm the person that makes the decision, yes or no. And my job evolves around that. And my employment will continue if I continue to put the right people on the field. Um, it's when somebody gets, I won't say turned down or passed over, or it's like I had a conversation with a fellow the other day that he's a good umpire. He's a really good umpire, but I gave him a handful of things that are paramount that he works on. And by the end of the conversation, he said, I know I'm a couple, 3 years away, and if it happens, it happens. If it didn't, then it wasn't meant to be. I'd like for everybody to take that attitude. Of course, that's not going to happen, but it's the person making the decision. And right now, it's my observations, my projection, what somebody can do over the next 2 or 3 years as far as development goes, things like that.
And the fallback to that is, you're right. It's your opinion that matters. And so
Mm-hmm.
ask the questions that needs to be asked in the areas of improvement. And so I always say, get clarification. Don't
Without
just say,
doubt.
okay, I got feedback and I don't agree with it, and you leave.
No, without doubt. And that's why I started incorporating videos and still shots. Like I said, Dave, a lot of stills and videos of a myriad of people. Because I'm never going to say anything. I'm never going to evaluate somebody or critique somebody or try to change somebody's mechanics or position or whatnot without reason. Okay. I could give somebody a list of 10 things and say, go work on them, but where's the why? I want to give them the why and the how. And once again, far be it from me, I am not the say all be all for college baseball umpires. I learn every time I go to a game, I learn. I can't tell you how many times I'll pull out my CCA book and just to verify that the crew got it right, got the rotation right, whether it be outfield coverage or whatever, just a refresher for me. I'm a far better 3-person umpire now than I was when I was on the field. But that's from watching, 150 games a year. But I will never just give somebody a bunch of verbiage and not the why and the how.
Caleb, let me slide in here before you. I know you got a question for John. Let me slide because I want to highlight something. John was sitting beside me and he said, Dave, who's your best umpire? And I sort of looked at him sideways. I cocked my eyes at him. See, that's a provocative question because you have to drill down into that question. I did. I was like, John, I said, I got a rules guy. I've got a game management guy. I got a guy that all the coaches love. I said, I got a guys that can shoot 95 every week on TrackMan. I said, that's a tough question, John, because I take all this and put it in a ball and I make my recommendations to you because, hey, with everything that this guy brings to the table, he can go to carry and he can umpire. Now, they get into your stable and you say, who's my best umpire? Well, it's from your lens. John, you're very technical. When you see a guy behind the plate, he may shoot a 95, but he doesn't look good doing it. Okay? He's not really in the slot. Well, is he a good guesser? I don't know. Coaches love him. He's shooting 95. He's not making mistakes. He's a good locker room guy. He's a good rules guy. He's one of my top guys. So when you say, who is your top guy? It's not easy to answer that. And I think that's what we're talking about. That's what we're getting at for these officials and umpires to understand that you have to be a complete, total umpire and understand what John is looking for because I have the next guy who may fit the bill of what he's looking for, and we're going to have to push you aside. So I don't want you to necessarily have to rehash that. That's part of the equation. When you say who are your top guys, it's really a neighborhood question.
Without doubt. But I'll tell you how I operate. At the national championship, the final two teams enter into it best 2 out of 3, just like at Omaha. Okay, and I evaluate the guys throughout the whole tournament. You know, I kind of sit out of sight, out of mind, and I'm making notes constantly. Now we're not going over things unless there's an issue. We'll go over stuff in the clubhouse, but otherwise, it's their time. I really am very passive at the national championship. But to give you guys an idea, the fellow that did the first championship plate job was a 31-year-old kid from Pennsylvania. He looked like Opie, okay? If you guys remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was that? I can't remember. But Andy
Griffith show.
Griffith.
Yep.
He looked like Opie. And this kid, his first play job of the weekend, he was a 94. His first championship game, he was a 94 and a half. Unflappable. And, you know, I felt so good and so happy for that kid because he's a 31-year-old kid in one of the biggest games he'll ever umpire. And he just knocked it out of the park. So, you know, because of his previous plate job at Cary.
And if we could transition a little bit to just kind of current state of the game, I'm very optimistic and really biased about how baseball is at the professional level, and also like what's happening in college baseball. I'm really excited about all the technology, the things that we're doing with replay, and how I'm also a big advocate of the clock, and I think that's been the most dramatic improvement of baseball, both at the professional and college baseball, like in my lifetime. I mean, it's quite dramatic. I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a state of how you see the state of baseball, and then also how you see, baseball at the Division II level right now.
I think the state of college baseball is very, very good at the Division I and Division II levels. I think we are not being affected by the shortage. I don't think the approach that Division I is taking, grabbing all the AA and AAA guys that are coming out of pro ball, I don't really agree with that. But in the same respect, it's kind of helping us at the Division II level because there are now Division I umpires that can't get full schedules, and they're filling in their schedule with Division II. Now that's might upset the apple cart with some less experienced Division II umpires losing a few games, but unfortunately it trickles downhill. You know, it's every Division II coordinator's job to put the best, just like me at the national championship, to put the best umpires they have available to them on the field. So we're not seeing the shortage. We're actually seeing kind of an influx of some young people, which is really, really great to see. People that want to learn and get better. And obviously most of them want to get to the Division I level at some point. But that's a double-edged sword as well, because the money, especially at the power levels, has gotten so good that the old-timers are hanging on as long as they possibly can because of the game fees. You know, you've got guys that weren't in shape for the last 15 years, and all of a sudden they've dropped 30 pounds, and instead of looking 60, they look 50. When a Division I umpire, a power umpire, through postseason, everything is going to make 75, 80 grand a year. My goodness, gentlemen, you know, there were years that I was in business, I didn't make that much money, you know, back in the 70s and 80s. You know, good for them. But I think the state of Division II baseball, I think, is tremendous. Now, like I alluded to earlier, out of 8 regions, I do have 1 or 2 softer regions. They just don't have the depth of officiating. A couple of the coordinators don't really put an emphasis on training, recruiting and training. You know, it's recruiting, training, retention. You know, can we find them? Can we train them, and can we keep them? Um, you know, if like a travel ball, I know that if the travel ball coordinators can retain 10 or 15% of their crop every year, I think that's a win for them. Well, we want to retain more than that. Um, so but overall, yeah, I think the state of college baseball is in a really good place. The streaming has helped. ESPN Plus has helped. Um, the technology has definitely helped, whether it be TrackMan or Yakratech. I am a big fan of the clock. I'm a huge fan of the replay. On the pro side, I am not a big fan of the automatic strike zone. I think that takes way too much personality out of the game. An old school purist, and I've got 3 or 4 pretty good friends that are big league umpires, and I think they're at the point where some of them don't care. You know, of course, their compensation has gotten pretty good over the years, and if they want to do that, okay, whatever. Um, you know, for 250 grand a year, people can do a lot of things, or look past a lot of things, I guess. So, but overall, yeah, I think college baseball is in great shape. I can I say one more thing? I I I I think that sports in general, college sports, not a big fan of the portal. I'm not a big fan of NIL. Um, every major NBA, NHL, MLB, NFL, NCAA, they all got in bed with these gambling sites. Okay, I'm just not a fan. I think when there's gambling, there's corruption, and I think we're seeing that at the big level. Some people getting in trouble. Um, I hate to see that, but you sell your soul to the devil, and that's what you get.
I tell you what, that kind of leads to kind of one of the last questions that we got for you is, what's one hard truth, John, that you'd like to say out loud? And guess what? You're about to say it. So, one hard
Well,
truth give us that one hard truth that, it's kind of unspoken, but maybe you just said it. I don't know. Maybe you won't expound on that,
that's
but that
prob
one hard truth.
that's probably it. When I was watching a college basketball game on TV the other day, and there was a kid playing that it was his fifth school in 5 years. Now that's a problem, gentlemen. That's a problem. It's just free agency, and I'm not so sure how much of the student slash athlete it is anymore. You know, where I know in the past graduation rates were very, very important on a coach on a coach's list of things to do. I don't know how important it is. Maybe at Vanderbilt it's important, or maybe at Stanford it's important. But how important is it at Kansas University? I don't know. I don't think it's near as important today as it was 25 years ago, and that's a shame.
John Brower. Yeah. You know what? It's been a pleasure, John. We do like to finish with one question. It's just I like to ask this question because officials of all sports are driving down the highway and they listen to John Brower and they may want to tune their radio to your favorite song, John. What would that be?
Oh man, I grew up in the 70s, but about 15 years ago, my son loaded up my phone with a country western playlist,
Yeah.
and now being an old guy, that's about all I can understand anymore. But I still enjoy the 70s. I really don't have a favorite, but I really enjoy country music. Of course, I grew up with the Beach Boys and the Beatles and that stuff you could understand. So much of the music today, I just can't understand it. You know, uh, but I'm old and. But yeah, if I had to pick, it would either be the oldies or country western.
So game day travelcast, if you like what you heard today, and you're traveling down the highway, tune your radio over to some oldies, 70s, and some country, and think of John Brower, our guest today. John, we've been such a blessing to have you on today. From Dave, Caleb, and Chris, we really appreciate you, my brother.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it.